Sergio, welcome to the Home Services Growth Summit show. Before we get into careers, tell us a little bit about AI Media Group.
So AI Media Group is an attribution-based tech company. We're an agency that's supported by technology. And at the end of the day, I feel that we've really cracked attribution. So how does somebody go from that inception point to that conversion? Considering social, video, mobile, content, programmatic. In other words, there's an entire journey that somebody takes. It doesn't mean that they convert organically. And what we've worked hard over the last 15 years is to really distill that in a way that allows you to make better decisions.
That's awesome, Sergio. Now, I know you guys are part of the Home Services Growth Summit, but tell us a little bit about your background and how you kind of came to where you are today.
Yeah, so I actually started my career in Yellow Pages, if I want to date myself. I think we all know that, and everyone at the Home Growth Services Summit would know that. And then transitioned into the world of internet. And I remember in 2008, when I was working at Verizon, even back then, there was a challenge for attribution, right? And that's the big buzzword today. But people really could not pinpoint that last point. People could pinpoint the last point of sale, but not really how it started. So I had this idea, this vision with two of my partners to be able to say, if we could really see somebody going from a Google to a Facebook to a video campaign and ultimately converting, now we've cracked the code. Because now you can take that media mix and take it from guessing to really knowing how the user's going through and then monetizing that in a better way. And that's how AI Media Group came to be.
So then let's lean in a little bit further into digital advertising and attribution. You work with clients in all kinds of different verticals, but especially with the work that you do in the home services space. What are you sort of recognizing that's a problem that exists for a lot of those types of folks?
Well, it's pretty interesting. Aside from the attribution that I'll say 50 times, it's a miss of the phone calls, right? So this is something that if you think about it is kind of archaic, but with home services, a lot of people are ending up making that call. Sure, you can fill out the form in the required fields on a site, but I think a lot of people miss the boat on saying that there's a lot of phone calls that are being made because there has to be a little bit more articulation when it comes to home services. And the trackability of what can be done in today's day and age with signals on the phone calls and being able to track that back to the inception point is incredibly important. So you start adding that with that user journey, the forms that are being filled, and then the call center without interrupting technology, and certainly without violating PII, it's just a missed opportunity.
So as businesses are planning their campaigns, right, and everybody's got their agencies, what's maybe one or two things that maybe they should be looking at that maybe their agency isn't putting emphasis on as they're looking to grow their business here in 2024?
So one of the challenges when you think about the home services is that it may not seem like social or video, certain components are as important or that they convert, right? So people are very visual, especially when it comes to their home. So those are incredibly important, but many times people look at this as just an engagement or a like, but they don't see a conversion. And where does a conversion usually happen? On Google. They get all the credit. But the heavy lift was done by that mid to top of the funnel. And by really being able to figure out mathematically how people are going through, it's a reinvestment in saying, hey, it's not organic that's doing all the lift or just my paid campaign. It's really all these other tactics that seem like they're not performing, but those are the ones that are actually leading to that conversion. And those nuggets of information and putting it all together is probably the biggest piece. Additionally to that is when you think about the branding aspect and the lead gen perspective, a lot of organizations have them segmented. And while you have to have different people working on those things, at the end of the day, it's all one goal. Whether it's branding or whether it's lead gen, it's to drive sales.
Yeah, it's one of the things that drives me bananas, especially with TV, with traditional TV or set-top box TV, is somebody picks up their phone, which basically becomes their Google machine, and then they attribute too much to a mobile ad as opposed to the TV driving it or even social. Because I know a lot of people that don't trust, Facebook ads. They want to go to Google, and then it becomes that sole arbiter of truth for them investing too much in one channel versus another. And I know attribution, like anything else, is a bit fluid, especially as we, move to this cookieless world. But what challenges does that present for you in the way that you are able to measure results?
Well, that's actually been beneficial. Everyone's been afraid of the cookieless world and what's going on in the news, especially with privacy. But due to the fact that we're a first-party cookie on the site, and this is a bold claim, but it's something that we could substantiate, we are actually seeing more data than a Google or a Facebook when it comes to putting them together. So if you think about this, in the old world with cookies, Facebook had their code everywhere. And the challenge was that you would look at the CRM with somebody in home services, and both Google and Facebook reported more either revenue or leads than were actually going in. And we all knew that. The idea behind it is that since we are representing the .com, the actual domain, and it is first party, we have the ability, because it is that domain, to be able to see between Google, between Facebook, give proper credit. And those are just two examples, and ultimately be able to weigh that. So now somebody can look at it and say, okay, my investments in social and video, while they're not paying off directly as a last click, they're that huge contributor to somebody ultimately converting organic. And that does change the media mix that's out there.
And this is great stuff, Sergio. So I know you're going to be part of the Home Services Growth Summit. What gets you excited, or what makes you want to be part of it? Now, I know you're already a great guy because you're a huge Superman fan, like myself. I love seeing him on your desk there. What's got you excited? What's wanting you to be part of this great event?
I think it's the big opportunity in our organization. The longer the average order value and or the life cycle. So if you think about organizations that are selling widgets, that's all well and good, but it's kind of an impulse buy. When you think about your home and home services, there's a little bit of a longer tail behind that. There's a lot of competition, and that just means immense rich data that's coming in. Put into the phone calls and everything, and it's being able to use all of that math, because really that's what powers it, to be able to say the whole media mix, not that it was wrong, we just didn't have insight to it. And in this particular vertical, as I said, there's so much opportunity where you may start a query here, let's say in my office, and then I'll go home and I'm speaking to my wife about it. And then on the way back, I'm looking at my mobile phones. That's a longer journey. And being able to stitch all of that together is probably one of the most exciting things.
Well, so many businesses have such a strong appetite for leads, and I want to start thinking about some of the ways that they can do better as things change this year. What do you think the impact will be? You've been through this before, of an election year specifically on digital marketing. I mean, we think about this, with TV advertising where there's so much limited buy, but I tend to start screaming about connected TV opportunities out there, and people are trying to figure out how much space is out there, especially in the digital marketing world.
Well, election years are typically good years in general. We'll see how this year it shakes out. It gets more crowded.
Depends on if your guy wins or not, or girl.
Exactly. Or gal. It all depends. But with that said, economically, it's typically good. The big thing is that it becomes more crowded, the space, but it also means there's more eyeballs. So when you speak about CTV or OLV, since there are more eyeballs there, there's more opportunities to get in front of people. And then if you think about something from CTV, it's taking that person where they are watching those spots and then being able to convert them later on when they're on the digital. Well, it's all digital, but when they're intent-based, or when they're looking at Instagram or Facebook, or all the other mediums that are out there. So kind of long-winded way of saying is it's a very good time because you have that many more people that are engaged, which means more people to get in front of with the right messaging.
Explain, if you will, to listeners who may not be familiar with this. I mean, full disclosure, I used to work for Sergio, so I love their technology, but I've spoken about this at conferences. This is what you do every day. Explain the tale of attribution, because I think so often it's eye-opening to people who think, when you buy, or when you look at a college, for example, Dustin's got a child who's looking when they're 16, and it's, a couple years away. So those ads that you thought of don't convert tomorrow. It's a year out before they sign on. Or if it's a makeup brush, they may click on an Instagram ad and then boom. But when you think about that tail, just explain it more eloquently than I'm doing, but so that people understand there's a different tail in any vertical, especially home services.
Yeah, so for home services is great. So you made a point about, that makeup brush. It's kind of an instant impulse buy. It's inexpensive enough. You see it on Instagram, you click it. Not that I'm buying makeup brushes, but I'm a big guilty party of buying things on Instagram and saying I really didn't need this, and then you're not returning it. But if you think about somebody like, let's just say like roofing, and we're in the middle of winter right now, you start thinking about this. there's a long window between that consideration and ultimately converting. So there are a lot of ads, to your point, that are being served today. And then they're not getting the credit if you're using a 30-day cookie, which we know cookies are going away. But you really have to look at that. So with the attribution that we put in place, the ability is you can really see a year, or you can see a user up to a year in market. And that's incredibly important for services that keep on going, like lawn care, pest control. We know that that's happening every year. Then take consideration different geographies. What's happening now in New York is they're very different than Miami, just because of the weather conditions. Point being that you have to have an attribution that allows you to collect an immense amount of data, be able to apply math to it and say those ads that we spent X amount of dollars on in video, programmatic, social, whatever it may be, actually were a huge contributor to that organic sale or booking that happened 3 months later. So you have to be able to look at all of that and be able to have enough time in market with the research to be able to say, this is what's actually converting. That doesn't mean that as we get closer to that window, we get closer to the spring, and we really start thinking, in my example about that roofing, that people are even more engaged. But now you're able to look back and say, hey, the engagement level of these people that are coming in right now that are high are actually because of what happened here. And they can start putting them into different buckets, right? Because somebody that just started becoming engaged here is great, but somebody that's been thinking about it for months, the propensity for them to convert is much higher.
Yeah, well, nobody in the history of time has ever woken up and said, I want a roof today. But they know it's a needs-based purchase, and being able to stitch that back through, to your point about how you stitch it through, can make a major shift in how you spend your dollars when a storm hits and you desperately need that roof.
So 2 points that you just made there. One is, one of the worst things that could happen is that you have advertising in market today, preparing for that season, let's say in the spring and the summer, when people are thinking of roofing as an example. And then all of a sudden the marketers say, hey, well, that didn't work. But all that marketing, all it did was educate a consumer. And then the people that have marketing in market during that time frame benefit from it. So that's one point behind it. The other one on the last one you made is being able to follow that user all the way through and delivering those right messages, right? And not treating everyone equally, right? Everyone's going to leave that tail, and getting in front of the people that are not just hand raisers, but have engaged many times is incredibly important.
Well, this is not going to be a sales pitch question, but it is I think is a softball question. It's good guidance for any home services or home improvement or any business. When you are considering looking at an agency because you think your current agency might be underperforming, what advice would you give the brand to take up in consideration? And I'm trying to keep it as generic as possible so it doesn't sound like it's not about selling AI. This is about who you consider, because a lot of these companies change agencies and then they don't always make the right choices.
Well, it's a difficult thing because performance first and foremost for me is key, right? So you have to look at ultimately what's the ROAS, what's the cost per that you're getting for. That's the easy part. The harder part is to be able to say, okay, well, what kind of data and insights are actually being brought in? Because beyond the unit economics of what's happening, it's what are the insights? How can the organization use that beyond just that digital play in their offline and everything else that they're doing? And with the advent of AI, it's all about the data that you're putting in. We know that the more information and the more clear information we're able to feed into AI, the better the output is going to be. So there's a big shift. It's a pivotal shift in market right now if you have the right data. And to answer your question more succinctly, when you're looking at an agency, it's great. We all have great people. We all have great methodology, but it has to come back to math. It has to be, can you clearly show the journey of a user? Can you put them into buckets? Can you track it all the way through? And most importantly, is it a real-time element? Because there's a short window as it happens. And if you're not capitalizing on that and waiting for a report 30 days later, that time is gone.
Well, Sergio, one, thank you for being part of this show. Thank you for investing in us. It's going to be a great show. If people want to hear and see the genius that is Sergio Alvarez, they got to go to the Home Services Growth Summit in Atlanta on February 27th to 28th. But if they don't go to that, where can people find out more about you?
They can find us at aimediagroup.com.
All right. Good job. We'll see you there.
Thank you all.
We'll see you there. Thanks for your time, Sergio.
Thank you.